Hello, viewers. I'm Vibhuti Jha. This is Jaipur Dialogue USA. Just as always, request you to please like, subscribe, and share our channel with your friends and family. Let the community expand. Share your feedback. We value your feedback immensely. Today, we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, and that is presidential election. Mr. Biden is retiring finally. Mr. Trump is taking over finally. And to talk about the policy implications of this new presidency, 47th, I have great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Mark Meirowitz. Dr. Mark Meirowitz, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA for the first ever time, and I hope we will continue to have the dialogue further as we go along. Just for a brief introduction of Dr. Mark Meirowitz, he's a professor at State University of New York, Maritime College, and a political analyst, and also he threatened me that he's a lawyer. So that's on the lighter side of life. So Mark, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA for the first ever time, and I hope we will continue our dialogue many more times.
It's a pleasure indeed.
Thank you. Wanted to ask you something because perspectives are very important in life. So we have seen 4 years of Trump as 45, we have seen 46 Joe Biden, and we are entering into 47 with Mr. Trump back in the saddle. And, in a very, very Hindu way, I wanted to say that perhaps Trump not winning 2020 was good for him and for the country. Sometimes, people miss a flight and they curse themselves. And, oh, my bad luck, I missed my meetings. And then lo and behold, the flight crashes. And then he's the luckiest guy to have to miss the flight. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, a spiritual perspective. It was a good thing that happened that Trump didn't win 2020, because now people know that what happened to him in these 4 years, the country must not experience that again. So I'm a Republican. I think you are a Republican too. So my question here is, how do you evaluate Biden, when he said that Gaza settlement, hostage release, when people talked about Trump getting the credit, he, like a kid, said that, is that a joke? And I thought that was a very cruel joke by the outgoing president. Your thoughts?
First of all, thank you very much for the tremendous privilege of doing this with you. We did have a chance to do an interview recently on a network, yes. And it was really a tremendous pleasure to hear your views. And I had an immediate connection virtually to you, and I reached out to you. Also, when I do interviews, I'm completely nonpartisan and non-sectarian, so I want to make that point. So rather than alluding to anybody's political affiliations, I think as Americans, we can have, a candid discussion about how we feel about the progress of the country, which is good for everybody. And that's why I really do believe that Trump coming in needs the support of the Democrats. I'm not so sure the Democrats are going to be on board to help Trump succeed. And that is worrisome for me. About the transition, it's interesting. There's an analogy here that's kind of interesting to the Iran hostage crisis. Because if you remember, Carter was president. The hostages were taken under his when he was president, and then they were released on Inauguration Day when Reagan came in. Now there are lots of discussion about how that happened, but it's very similar here because you now have Trump coming in January 20th. You have this horrible hostage crisis in Israel and in Gaza, and Trump says there's going to hell to pay if I don't get those hostages released. And then the Biden administration comes in and, I guess, working with Trump, because very candidly, even the spokesman at the State Department made a very clear point that the Trump representatives were very helpful in making the deal to come to fruition. So the fact is that when Biden made that comment that you referred to, and also I should mention Blinken, when he was in his last press conference, I don't know if you followed that, they asked him about it also. And the spin was that, oh, we were working on this for months and we did it and Biden did it and we did it and the president did it. And again, no acknowledgement to the involvement of the incoming president. And so I think that disappointing, but I have to say, Vibhuti, that I'm not surprised, because this is the mantra, if I can use a word, of the Biden administration. They have been a failure to do foreign policy in an appropriate way, and we can talk more about that, especially on the Middle East. Indeed, just one example, Jake Sullivan wrote an article in Foreign Affairs magazine, I think it was in 23, about how the Middle East is so quiet because of Biden's great policies and foreign policy in the Middle East. Then came October 7th, and believe it or not, Jake Sullivan had to rewrite his article and submit an updated article to Foreign Affairs magazine to explain why it was that the Middle East was now in a cataclysm. So I think was a failure to predict, a failure. Now, it's not, look, we're not Nostradamus, but the fact is things were brewing. And the truth is Israel was caught off guard tremendously as well. And what a catastrophe. But again, this transition, Biden says, I'm going to have a best transition ever. But in the meantime, he's doing all kinds of stuff that is undermining the incoming administration. But look, we're polarized. Democrats and Republicans don't get along, and that is the tragedy of our political system. So I turn to you to see what you can think of to bring the Democrats and Republicans together, because the fact is, as Americans, we should be working together, and we shouldn't be working at odds to achieve peace, security, and a good future for America and for the world. And we're pivotal for that. So I think it's most unfortunate we saw that, just the last point, in the Hegseth hearing. I think we saw their very strident hearing. Look, I understand the points the senators were making, and they're valid points about whether women should be in combat. That's a legitimate discussion. But the stridency with which they questioned Pete Hegseth was, I thought, very unbecoming of the United States Senate, to me, which is such an august institution and had such a wonderful history in our country. The tenor of the tone of the discussion was not sufficiently collegial to be able to be a discussion about an important question of how our defense should be developed going forward. So I'm disappointed, but let's be realistic. This is how it is, and we have to do better.
We have to do better. And obviously, as you rightly said, that American politics, American government, America by itself is a country that people want to give an arm and a leg to come here. And at this point in time, the current breed of congressmen and senators that do not inspire confidence in Americans, leave aside the foreigners, because America has made its democracy unexportable item, because people do not like what they see in America. And that's what is important, because first of all, we are a constitutional republic. Transition, we talk all good things, no doubt about that. But as we see, the edifice of that entire structure is collapsing because the politicians are at loggerheads with each other. They are not caring for the country. And, California fire is one such example that it's a shame on America. Maui fire was a shame on America for our abilities, that we are sending spaceships and we are doing incredible research, but we can't do the little things right. Now, coming to these and very important thing, the 4 years of Biden administration, I would like to forget it in a hurry. He will, in my assessment, which is non-partisan again, because I was a Democrat once, became an independent, and became a Republican. So I have transitioned. So I'm not against anything. It's a system. We have adopted a system, a Democrat and Republican, and in between we have Green and Libertarians and others. But we remain essentially a two-party system. And I recall a very wise American who I considered wise, he still is wise guy. He told me that just as India has the challenge of too many political parties, we have a challenge or misfortune of having only two parties, of which one is stupid, the other is evil. So go make your figure out which one is what. I'm not going to comment on that part. But what is important is what I told in a think tank run by a Jewish lady. that America can't be run down. People can't, because America is, juxtaposition in India and US relationship. US is, Alaska and Hawaii included, 3 times larger than India. It has 1/4 the population. It has a reasonably great infrastructure in place. It's a remarkably resource-rich country. And everybody who comes to America wants to become rich. So there is a tradition of working hard to fulfill an American dream. That dream is getting shattered because politicians in this country are at loggerheads and they are not looking at America's welfare anymore, though they talk about it all the time. So let's talk about, Mr. Trump will have his inauguration done in a few days' time. He has made a lot of statements. And I remember when he won the election, he made a public declaration, not an announcement. He made a declaration that if you do not release the hostages before I take over, all hell will break loose. So it is childish on behalf of Biden to claim credit for that. He definitely did not plan and orchestrate to take the credit just 2 days before his relinquishing his position. So tell us, with reference to specific agenda of Trump, make America great again. He has owned that entire phrase, which was given by Reagan at one time. Tell us something about it. How do you see these 4 years unfold, given that Democrats will do whatever it takes to derail him?
Well, I think you make a number of very profound points. I just want to not forget what you said about the point that you said that America's flavor, mission is unexportable. Well, I think that really relates to our soft power and the power that not that we get from our military or economic boycotts, but from our Americanism, our American story. And that is very, very important point. And I'm going to think a lot about it, much more now that you mentioned it, because you see, to me, if I look at Europe today, I see failure. Example of that is that the E3, which is UK, France, and Germany, are negotiating with Iran on a nuclear deal. Can you believe this? After every single thing that's gone on, after the unbelievable failure of what happened in the Middle East, and the fact that Iran sent thousands of missiles against Israel, which the United States helped to shoot down. And in the Biden administration, there were still people who wanted to go and have negotiations with Iran. So there's a failure of some sort of logic. And to quote Mr. Poilievre, and I know I can't pronounce his name, the Canadian conservative, common sense is absent in many of our politicians. Common sense, emphasizing, I'm all aboard with climate change, but emphasizing those issues that are not important when we have life and death situations going on is really shortchanging the people of this country. So I think that I agree with that. I also think the American mission, as it's understood by Americans, has gotten a bit befuddled and confused. What is that mission? The mission is, of course, to be a prosperous country, to be a free country. And a lot of that has fallen away. It has fallen away. And all you hear from a Biden when he leaves office, he blames it on the oligarchs. He blames it on the oligarchs. And who are those oligarchs? Apparently, they're only Republicans. But what about the fundraisers for the millions and billions of dollars for Kamala Harris's campaign? They're not oligarchs? I mean, the whole idea of bringing that concept forward was, I think it was just, I think madness. I hate to say it, but just ridiculous. Because Americans can work together for our mission, but we're also pivotal for the mission of the world. We are the key to peace and stability in the world. And that is something that I think got a little bit forgotten. Now, about working together and bipartisanship and the future of Trump's agenda, I would say the one thing that the polarization, We had Biden calling the supporters of Trump garbage. We had Hillary Clinton calling supporters, deplorables who supported Trump. This was not only foolish, but a misstep and a mistake to understand, to think that there are all these like deplorable people out there. They're perfectly intelligent and capable people that supported the other party. Why degrade them? Number one. But number two is this, and I think it's an important point, and I'd like to know what you think. Trump said, if all the hostages are not released, all hell is going to break loose, correct? And what was the deal that his representative was able to cut in Qatar? Qatar, which itself is the haven for the Hamas leader, now made his statement in Qatar. So Qatar and Egypt are the so-called mediators. And what's the deal that they cut? If you look into the deal itself, it is, I'm not going to say the word. In the Wall Street Journal, someone called it a deal with the devil. All I'm saying is that when you negotiate with terrorists, you cannot accept the idea that you're going to be negotiating like if Americans are sitting across the desk with Indian representatives and we're talking about Indian-U.S. relations. We have groups of competent, stable, intelligent, well-meaning people. When you have the terrorists on one, you're not even directly sitting with Israel, and Israelis and Americans and others, you cannot expect a result other than I'll give you back your people who we've murdered and we've raped and tortured, and please give us back more terrorists by the thousands to go back and fight and do the same thing again. And that's exactly what they said. Now, my point, to make it clear, is that a lot of people, many of whom are supporters of President Trump, as I am too, are very disappointed with this deal. Now again, realistically, he put a deadline down. Biden was still in office. Keep that in mind. It's the same Biden who cut off arms to Israel, threatened Israel, I'm going to cut off your arms, survival. So we got, I think, a situation which is probably going to be a half-empty glass, not an empty glass, not a full glass, good enough to get the process moving and hopefully to get hostages out. If you take hostages in this country and you kidnap someone, I think you would get either life imprisonment or be executed. However, in the Middle East, you can take hundreds of hostages, including a babies, children, elderly people who are sick and need medicine, and that you become a bargainer. You become able to sit and be able to make statements and to be able to have credibility on the world stage. And that is, I believe, what Moynihan meant when he said in his commentary article, defining deviancy down. We have sunk so low that when our State Department, Mr. Blinken, speaks about this, he says, well, they're both parties and on both sides, and Israel did this and Hamas did that, as if they are parity, as if one party is a state and the other isn't, except one party is a state and the other is a group of, murderers. I mean, that's all. I mean, it is so clear why the world doesn't all see this is a discussion that is very, very complicated. Why world institutions fail to function, fail to operate, why the Red Cross does not go in and look at hostages like they're supposed to and see if they have medicine, why they don't do it. It's a big, big lift. But in terms of America, right, the deal, I think right now, we have to be pragmatic. Yet a lot of people who support President Trump, of course, Biden took credit for it, said, oh, gee, this is the deal you cut? Well, it's the deal they cut in the interim because Biden is still in office. And we have to be realistic and hopeful the end of this crisis will come soon and the war will end. And the same with Ukraine. Anyway, I don't know, I've gone on, but I'd like to know what you think.
No, you are right about it. The compromise, in my definition, in a compromise, the one who is right always loses because he has to give in more. So it's like I always throw this issue. I was very proud of America that America doesn't negotiate with terrorists. This is a very profound statement. It's something like in a compromise, what happens is you can't have a compromise in 2 drops of poison and a gallon of milk. You cannot do that.
Right.
And that's the issue that we have to understand, the democracy, free world. And that's the issue that is important that Trump has talked about. And vis-a-vis the leftist Marxist, which my friend calls it the woke army of leftists, Marxists, Leninists, Islamists, used by the James Bond megalomaniac billionaires, elitist billionaires. These have found a common thread to exploit the various elements of democracy. Freedom is there to be abused. So freedom is being hit hard by these elements. As you know, they have found it that freedom is the issue on which we can take down democracy. And that's what is happening. Freedom for me, not for thee. That's the whole thing which is happening. And I do not know why the Western democracies, and India included, we are bending backwards to accommodate a faith, a piece of faith that wants us dead. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as I said, for this purpose, I'm nonpartisan, non-sectarian, and so my point is
it's an opinion and a thought.
Right. So my point about it, and I think it's a good point about democracy's vulnerability. Democracy is very vulnerable. I mean, if we were authoritarian state for real, and if we were, under Xi Jinping or Putin, then they'd get to say what everybody had to think and do, and we couldn't have this conversation. They would shut us down and put us in jail. They say, okay, you guys, that's it. You've said something, just like I saw, I don't know if it's true, that even in Britain, the police came because somebody posted something on social media that they didn't like. Who knows if that's true or not? But my point is that we're a free country, and as a lawyer, which you alluded to before, I'm a believer in the rule of law. I believe that in the First Amendment. But being a democracy in a free country is a very tenuous thing if you really want to pursue it. It can be abused. There's no question about it. But, to me, what I think as the child of immigrants, parents who were in Auschwitz in the Holocaust, I consider myself blessed every time I see the American flag. I think that how lucky I am to be an American, and therefore how precious that is. And so I'm invested in the future success of the country. So what I'm trying to get at is that what I thought was disappointing about the Kamala Harris campaign with Donald Trump is not that I agreed or disagreed with her or her views or her candidacy, is that she was such a very weak and failed candidate who was unable to, carry the position of being a candidate for the president of the United States. Is a very important position for the country. Can you imagine? I mean, again, had she been elected the president of this country, I mean, I also don't understand the euphoria about the convention and all that. It's not partisan. I would have been happy to see someone like a Hubert Humphrey or someone else. I mean, I may not agree policy-wise, but the baggage that comes along with the concepts in one party versus another, it becomes very strident and extreme. And you know what? We don't get anything accomplished if we yell at each other. We need to talk to each other. On the other hand, violence and violent protest and all of this that we're seeing and interrupting speakers and things like that. Blinken even had it. I don't know if you saw the press conference Blinken had. He was interrupted by 2 reporters screaming and shouting that Blinken himself should be in The Hague and he's a war criminal or whatever. Crazy. Even in the hearing it wasn't Hegseth, I think, was it for, I don't know, for one of the nominees? They had people getting up. Oh, Hegseth, yes. If you watch that hearing, people kept getting up, holding up signs and screaming as they want to interrupt the hearing. So you can't have an orderly democracy if you have these disruptions, and we're seeing this more and more. Now, I don't know how this works in India, but in Europe, if you see on the news, you see people walking and disrupting and doing, and this, they've been doing this for years and nobody does a darn thing about it. And we're seeing it here again. We need to be able to have the opportunity to calmly exchange our ideas and work together for the betterment of the country. Now, maybe that sounds idealistic, but, and everybody should have a chance to say what they think, but not to be, to come up with, disruptive things. Now, that's I know it's very idealistic, but I really believe in it. And as I said, as an American, I hope for the prosperity of all Americans and the ability of all of us to live in peace and express our views and practice our religions and beliefs, whatever they do, or no religion or no belief. Fine, please do. In many other countries in the world, you can't do it. We are a beacon. We are the city on a hill. This is what Reagan called us. We're a city on a hill. This is the Puritan idea. We're a city on a hill, and all eyes are on us. So we have to stand up high for that message and that example to the world. And in order to do that, we have to be able to be leaders, and we cannot allow, tyrants like Putin to invade Ukraine, or Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis to disrupt shipping and attack willy-nilly to innocent civilians. This is not acceptable. And I regret to say there are not many countries in the world that are able or willing to step up and do something about it. And that's America. And that's why I'm so proud to be an American. And I think that our message, our mission is crucial, especially right now when the world is in such turmoil.
I will come back to that question a little later about America being the city on the hill and the beacon of hope and everything else. But because I think somewhere along the line, America itself is failing itself for a variety of reasons. And unless and until, as a management guy, we always look down upon debriefing ourselves. Where are we doing things right and where are we messing it up? That world is coming to a situation that dictators rise. Maybe in the past, we have dealt with dictators in the past for ease of business or whatever. But I will come to the Trump inaugural and Trump's message of MAGA, and I want to focus on that part. So we have built a good background to America being what it was and what it needs to be. Tell us one thing. 2016, I was at the inaugural ball. I was one of those deplorables who was there. By the way, I have the pictures. I'll share that with you later. I was one of the rare Indians in the Liberty Bowl that happened in DC.
Very nice.
And there were protests while the inaugural was going on, and not my president. You had a massive protest emerge out of that. I recall watching, hearing that news that, Trump has ordered that Martin Luther King Jr.'s bust be removed from White House. False. Total false news. So Trump was a victim of so many bad, wrong, insidious messaging. Do you think that is going to happen again? Will the Democratic Party, as you in the opening statement said, you hope they collaborate, but will they? And how is the Trump agenda of making America great again going to go forward, and whether the Democrats will collaborate? And the Senate hearings of the candidates is one of the fascinating chapters in American political history. I love it because you really put the candidates through a grill. How do you think that is going to happen? Do you see a similar protest happening in DC again to derail Trump?
Well, I mean, it's possible they will do that again, no question about it. But remember, the first time around, it was Trump the first time around, so nobody knew him really. But now he's been president, so he certainly deserves an extra measure of respect for that. But here's the thing. My feeling is, and I think Senator Schumer and other senators have already stated, I think that they're now, they're ready to guard our liberty. I'm misphrasing them, but that they're ready, willing to step up and, guard our liberty against this president coming in. I do believe, if you take the issue of immigration, for example, what President Trump has said is he's going to implement on day one a deportation of criminals and so forth and so on. We're not going to the nitty-gritty of it. One issue where Trump has made a statement is on the birthright citizenship, which is the right of any person born in this country is an American citizen. And the issue that has come up, and is a big, big, big issue, is where illegal aliens come into the country and they have a baby, and the baby is then an American citizen, and that is a hook to get citizenship or rights for those. And he says, Trump, no more. I'm deporting. There's no more birthright citizenship. I'm deporting the whole family, right? Maybe I'm not getting it 100% right, but that's the tenor of it. I assure you that one will create a legal tsunami like never before. And the point is that the recourse to the courts, that what Trump's programs that he's going to propose, many of those will be challenged in the courts. And don't assume that because the Supreme Court, has a majority of conservatives, that they will buy into everything. I mean, look, the immunity case, that one's going up to the court. Now, the judge here, reaffirmed his decision, made a sentence against Trump. And that case, because the lawyers for Trump claim that he has limited immunity under the Supreme Court decision. And the judge said, no, you don't. So that goes up. That's going up on appeal. That's going to be a very, very contentious case. The case itself, when it was decided, the debate among the statements among the Supreme Court justices were, I think it was Kagan or Sotomayor, if the president orders Navy SEALs to go assassinate somebody, what would happen? There'd be immunity and all of that, kind of, I don't think, a little bit reductio ad absurdum, absurd points. But my point basically is that will the Democrats, now you do have different types of Democrats. I mean, you have a Richie Torres who's here in New York in the Bronx, and or how about even Fetterman? I mean, Fetterman in Pennsylvania is a guy who says, look, hey, he's the president. I go talk to him in Mar-a-Lago. I'm a Democrat, but I'm willing to talk to people, and if they want to tell me their opinion, I'm happy to hear it. And I'm not going to be just, a robot lockstep in whatever I'm told to vote for, which as a senator, and that's the reason the Senate has 100 members too, it has a smaller group so that they can actually deliberate and think about things, which you said before, the majestic Senate, advice and consent. The founding fathers gave the Senate that job to vet, not the Congress, not the House, because that's the passionate House, and the Senate should deliberate. And so Fetterman sets a good example for the rest of the Senate. Now, are the others going to follow? Well, we saw the Hegseth hearing. I mean, again, making the points very, very important. Now, Hegseth, again, I'm not a predictor, but he might not get through. But the other nominees, I mean, Rubio, Doug Burgum, if you listen to those hearings, they were, collegial in every respect, working together. That's the paradigm. That's the model that we should be going for, working together for the good of the country and finding the best way for the government to work for all the people. That was working fine. But I'm not so sure that the minority, now I have to say, it's equal opportunity responsibility, because again, when Scalia died, right, and Obama nominated Merrick Garland as a Supreme Court judge, McConnell said, I'm not even going to interview him. We're not even going to do it. We're waiting for the next president, hoping it will be Trump, right? So, it's that both sides, even with the filibuster and cloture, which is a whole other discussion, but the basic point is we still have the filibuster in for a bill. And save us, please, from ever taking that away, because with 60 votes, except for reconciliation of the budget. You've got to work together. And that was the reason they put that rule in. Majority government is in the House, not in the Senate. Senate has a filibuster. So my point being, collaborative government works only if the members of both parties work together. I wouldn't say I am optimistic based on what we're hearing. The idea with Trump is that Trump is not only an incoming president from the point of view of the Democratic Party, is some sort of a movement or a thing or something that they feel opposed to, and they must rise up and do something about it. And really, that's the wrong idea. If he's the president, you're supposed to support him. You can criticize the president, sure. You can, but notice in the first term, Trump impeached twice. No, first of all, we only had three presidents. We've had Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Trump. Trump impeached twice. And of course, without belaboring it, all the lawsuits that have been brought, that's a whole story. But what I'm trying to get at is, on birthright citizenship, on all these issues, recourse to the courts in a concerted effort to try to contain or overturn these initiatives. Now, I don't know if they're right initiatives or wrong initiatives. That's a judgment call. That's how you feel about the policy. But the idea that any policy that the administration brings up is ripe for contest is very worrisome, because you get nothing accomplished. Doesn't everybody agree the immigration problem is a big issue? It is. We need to solve it. But we had that HR 2, and the Democrats were in the majority, and they killed it. It was a bipartisan bill. So what I'm trying to get at is, if we're going to keep doing this tit for tat, and we're going to keep knocking each other down, we'll never get anything accomplished, and we're going to still have these problems. So, we're hoping that the two parties, remember, the Democrats are in the minority in the House, they're in the minority in the Senate, and the Supreme Court has a majority of conservative judges. So this is the time for responsible Republican leadership. That's my point. And we have to try to be careful to try to get the other party on board. But again, I'm being very optimistic and maybe too idealistic. So get ready, hold on, hold your horses, and get ready for the roller coaster ride on January 20th. Is going to be something wild and crazy, no question, because the Democrats are not just going to sit there and say, fine, we're going to let you succeed. And that's really sad. It's really sad.
It is. Yeah, I mean, look, political rhetoric, I find that in America has gone really at a very low levels. I remember Mitch McConnell did that with Barack Obama. When Barack Obama became president, openly made the statement, we will make sure that he doesn't get the second term, or something, paraphrase that statement. And I wonder, Mitch McConnell, such a senior senator, makes such an irresponsible statement, because you don't need to make that statement, because we know that as Republicans, you want your Democrat Party to lose anyway. But by making that statement, you made yourself completely deplorable, if I may say so. But the issue here is very important again. Obama did the same thing. If you disagree with him, you are a racist. That is the kind of rhetoric which has hurt America the most. Chuck Schumer was the one, our New York senator, who made the statement and gave advice to Trump, stay away from intelligence agencies. They know how to get you 6 days from Sunday. Well, he had 2 attempts on his life. So it's a very dangerous, tricky situation that Trump is going to face in his administration. And I hope sincerely that he doesn't take up unnecessarily complicated issues to derail his big train of things that he wants to do. So I am told that lawsuits are already ready for all the stuff that he wants to do. Lawsuits are ready to be filed and derail the system. Now tell me one thing about the tariff part. He's gone on record threatening everybody with tariff. Canada became a joke. Trudeau became a joke. Everybody is wondering what the tariff is. As a banker, as a student of economics, I know it's a negotiating tool. I'm throwing tariff, negotiate with me. What do you think about his clarion call to tariff.
Well, I agree. I'm a corporate lawyer by background and negotiated many things. I mean, obviously, it's a negotiating ploy. There's no question. I mean, look, if you read The Economist, which I do, and that's a pretty. I mean, they're pretty good at understanding things. They talk about the economic implications of these tariffs, and you don't actually crash the entire building in order to make a point. I mean, he made the point, and as you see, it has an effect. Now, you know what it is, though? I think after a while, when you keep making, it's kind of like the guy who cries wolf, after a while, when you keep on making these threats and then you don't carry through on them, it's like Obama, saying there's a red line in Syria and he better not use any chemical weapons. And he used chemical weapons. He didn't do anything about it. So in this one here, you end up with, but by the way, I want to forget one thing, what you said, and I just remembered. Notice, as much as Obama talked about Trump and Trump talks about Obama, they were sitting there at the funeral for President Carter and they were chumming up together and laughing together. And, at hope springs eternal, that people can actually work together, and I think we've seen it. We saw Tip O'Neill, Democrat extraordinaire, Speaker of the House, Massachusetts Dem, as much a Democrat from A to Z. Just bear with me one second. Just as much as a Democrat from A to Z. I need to pause for 1 second because my computer is going low. Just give me a moment, please. Okay, good. They got together on a regular basis and they discussed stuff. They would meet at the White House. They would talk, Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they resolved things. Simple. It's not complicated. Our leaders have more in common than they don't. Now, about the point you made about the tariff. The tariff to me is a ploy, I think, because if you carry it out, you cause an economic disaster. We know that tariffs, in many respects, caused the Depression in the United States. I mean, you can actually upend the whole economy by doing this. So there's no point to it. He knows it. I think Trump is a businessman like you, and he knows it very well. He's quite knowledgeable in business, for sure. And he knows he's not going to do it. And he's not going to do it against Canada. Now, about China, that's another story. And we could talk about that. I mean, I think China has taken unbelievable advantage of the United States, taking our technology, you name it. And, we even reading, I mean, they have hackers and TikTok. I mean, it's endless.
Well, TikTok is banned already by Sunday. It will be gone.
And the Supreme Court upheld the ban. What I'm trying to get at is that when you're negotiating against an adversary, you can play maybe you want to play, it's not my decision, but play some more hardball with them than you would play hardball with Canada. Because you want Canada to succeed. If Canada doesn't succeed, that's not good for the United States. I mean, it's plain interest of the U.S. About Mexico, the situation in Mexico is disastrous. So, we need to figure out a way to work this out with the cartels. And, there seems to be a reasonably intelligent person, although, very left-leaning in Mexico today. But we have problems in South America. We've ignored Venezuela. I mean, oh my God. I mean, look what goes on there. This guy took an election and he stole it. I mean, we're facing a plate. The president's plate is so full, it's probably crashing already. And by the way, the great thing about this, think about this. We're having this discussion and Trump isn't even yet president, right? And he's already in there doing this. And I think from the hearings that you spoke about, we can see that the people he's nominated, for the most part, are knowledgeable. I mean, Rubio knocked the ball out of the park. Unbelievable. I mean, he never wavered for a minute. He was spot on. He knew his stuff. In fact, there was one case where one of the senators said, there's a statute, I remember which was, It's expiring in 2025. He said, no, 2026. He knows his stuff. And he's also on the right side. And I don't mean the right and the right. He's on the correct side on the issues. And he's common sense, and he knows what he's talking about. And he has, I think, the approach of what a Secretary of State should be doing. Now, this is not to comment on Blinken, but I mean, I have to say, with respect to the Secretary of State, that his administration was a blank sheet of paper, where we not only didn't gain ground, we lost so much ground. And what it was that politics was suffusing everything. And of course, the lack of leadership at the top. Although everybody sings the praises, Biden's leadership, Biden loves Israel, Biden this, Biden that, we really don't believe that that Biden, and he's getting a lot of flack now. Why didn't you pull out? And why do you say that you would win? The Wall Street Journal has an article today that Biden claiming he would have won, that the Harris people are not happy. The Harris people are not happy. I'm an equal opportunity watcher of rallies. I watch them all. Trump's, Harris's, and all. Harris's rallies and no press conferences as a future president, and Trump would stand there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, answer questions, whether you like the answers or not. He's standing there and answering questions. She didn't answer a question. She didn't answer anything. And I have to say, and again, I don't think she kind of lived up to what she could have been as vice president. The vice president's job, which I teach American government, is to do nothing. That the VP is just sitting there. But sometimes they give a job, and they gave a job to her to be the border czar. But then Lester Holt asked her, did you go to the border? Yes, I did. No, you didn't. I didn't go to the border. Well, she didn't go to the border when she was the border czar. So, people, and I think the American people are smart enough to figure stuff out. We can see the real thing, and we can see what's not the real thing. So I think that this is why Trump won the electoral vote and the popular vote and had a landslide. That's why.
And a landslide. And we are not yet talking about Ukraine. That is another one, which Trump said that, he will have the solution done, sit across Putin and whatever. He has one thing which I noticed about his leadership. He always praises the opposition, whether it's President Xi or Putin or anybody else. He says, we failed in our job, and that's why they got the deal. They made use of us, or they exploited us. So he will sit across Putin. So, but do you see what solution can there be to Ukraine? Because that also brings in NATO as a picture, as a foreign policy element. Trump obviously is not happy with the NATO arrangement. It's the only war club, elite members war club only institution in the world out of 200 plus countries. And, this is a war club. That is not viewed by non-NATO countries as a positive thing. It is an institution that tries to threaten non-NATO members that you touch me and we will all attack you. One for all and all for one, Three Musketeers, Section 5 of the NATO agreements, whatever it is. Do you think Ukraine's solution will be something that this comedian actor Zelensky will manage to live with? Will it satisfy Putin? Will Trump get out of NATO? EU has said that we will undermine German election just as we did in some other country. And the question here is, what will be the fate of Europe under Trump? Ukraine, Russia, NATO?
Well, first of all, I don't see NATO as a war club at all. It's a collective defense. And by the way, Article 5, I don't think has ever been used except for 9/11. Right. It hasn't been invoked. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So obviously we're in a little bit of a tricky situation. I think NATO's existence is a tremendous deterrent, especially with Finland and Sweden in there. Finland has huge, readiness. They fought a war against Russia. They fought a number of wars against Russia. But I think that his demand now, I think he's demanding that the NATO members contribute 5% of GDP. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, he made a statement, they asked me, well, if they don't pay the dues, will I defend you if Russia attacks you? And I said, no, I wouldn't defend you. I mean, really? I mean, it's just, I don't know. You have to watch out when you say things like that, because I think it was John Foster Dulles or Dean Acheson who made some sort of a statement about Korea some years ago. And then, you can encourage people to do things. If they hear it from a president should be very reticent about who I'm going to defend, who I'm not going to defend. That relates also to Taiwan, which we could talk about. But I think the thing about Ukraine, by the way, Zelensky being a comedian, I just have to say on that, I did a program for my college students with the editor of the Kyiv Post. And I said to him, hey, this guy's a comedian. He said to me, yeah, Reagan was an actor. And being a comedian is good because you communicate. You learn skills of communication. And then it kind of hit me. That's a very good point. He's a good communicator. He goes around the world. He appears in parliaments. He talks about all the basic elements of the UK parliament, the US, and all over the world. And he touches the points that he needs to do for his own national interests. So for that respect, I get it. Now, the point about America's support of Ukraine, and the Republicans are not happy about it, is very significant about funding Ukraine. Now, the push to make a settlement with Putin, after all, he attacked. He originally took part of Georgia. In Georgia, he attacked. In Abkhazia and South Ossetia, he took that. He had the Donetsk and Luhansk. He took that. All along, this goes back to 2014. I mean, he's been doing this little bit, but it was only Biden pulling out of Afghanistan that created the big incentive to say, I can go do this because these Americans are not going to back anybody up. But they were wrong about that. We backed up Ukraine, but to fight Russia is a formidable, and North Korea fighting together with Russia is very formidable. So we have to make a decision. Now, the idea you're going to sit down with Putin and tell him that, he can have part of Ukraine and just should make a, possible solution, you end up with no solution like we have in Korea today. There is no end to the war. The war never ended. We have an armistice and there's no end to the war. One way to do it also, which is problematic because the country has been divided up in pieces, is to make Ukraine a part of NATO. There are a lot of suggestions that have been made, but, Trump has a relationship with Putin, and there may be a way to at least stop the war from continuing, because no president, that's Biden included, everyone wants wars on their watch. They don't want wars on their watch because, nothing, because I'm talking about politics. I'm not trying to be crass about it because people are being killed and atrocities. I had that New York Times article by a journalist who I know who wrote about the Russian atrocities. It's absolutely abhorrent what they've done there, and they're killing civilians and absolutely terrible. We need to support Ukraine. But the Republicans have said we cannot keep funding this endless spigot of money. It's a big problem. So here, Trump needs to show statesmanship and leadership, and we can't really. If we capitulate to Russia on this, then that will be an invitation to China and Taiwan, and they're watching this very carefully. They have been watching how the West and NATO have been supporting Ukraine in its war. Now, in Ukraine's favor, I would say they have not said, hey, you bring your troops and defend us. They know we want to fight for our land. We fight for our land, and please give us the wherewithal to fight, which is a little similar to what Israel says. Just give us the help that we need and the support. They're not exactly equal because Russia is a behemoth, and Hamas. It's a whole. Iran is a different scenario, an apple and an orange, but the same idea. So I think that the likelihood that we could have some sort of an armistice, an end to the war. Whether we have a complete solution to it is very hard to believe that that would happen. But I do think that if you make Ukraine part of NATO, then that becomes a collective security issue, but that could then inflame Russia. And look, what did Putin say? Putin said, hey, if something happens and someone attacks my nuclear plant or whatever it is, I will then use intermediate range nuclear missiles. I mean, holy mackerel. This is an escalation. We have no treaty. I don't think we have very many treaties. The intermediate force treaty is not been, they've not been following it anyway. So we don't have these, let's say, barriers or roadblocks to the escalation. So the end of the day is, I say, we have to scratch our heads and figure it out, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think it's an armistice and something in between, but not a complete solution. I don't see it.
As we come to the end of the program, I wanted to make my statement on this. One is, I still believe world does not need NATO. It is a European issue, and Europe must handle its own territorial ambitions that they indulge in from time to time. We know the impact of those territorial ambitions that have really ruined the world, given the First World War and Second World War, how the Holocaust happened because of one Hitler. The point of the matter, which I'm trying to say, is that there's no other country in the world or region in the world that has a club like NATO. If China were, to counter NATO, probably India, China get together and make a Pacific Treaty Organization, come and meet with me. I'm saying that those are divisive tools. The second one, which I want to say, is that American part of it. You said it about Ukraine. Secretary of State Baker, I think, had promised to Russia that NATO will not have Ukraine. And we Americans went back on it. So when other people's territory is impacted, we say, none of your problem, we'll take care of it. And then we violate, and then we say, why are you behaving the way you are behaving? So there is a thing called Spider-Man movie. With great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. And we have to kind of look back in our own self. Where are we actually screwing up? The final thing that I wanted to talk about is one very important issue, is the corporate ethics in America. And I will have your last word on it. Corporate ethics, starting with taking over of Twitter by Elon Musk. The way Democrats went after Elon Musk was pathetic. But now we see Zuckerberg coming out. We see many other billionaire communication people coming out to say, hey, Biden administration did that or that. One final thing, when I talked about Zelensky as a comedian, I love comedy as a profession because I can be funny too. But that's a different matter. I'm not referring to comedians as unfit to be the office bearers, but I'm talking about Zelensky being a comedian as a president who was not taking his job so seriously, in my opinion. I mean, he's not, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but the way he handled the whole situation was he was installed as a puppet, just as Yunus is installed as a puppet in Bangladesh. So I'm talking about, should America be so global in its approach, or should America be what MAGA philosophy is? Let's fix our house first.
So if I'll go in any direction here. First of all, America is the global power. It is the indispensable power. No one else will step up to that position, and we need to do it, whether we like it or not. And I think it's something that is very compatible with our mission. As far as India and China, God forbid that India and China get together with a Pacific military alliance. I recall that Chinese troops attacked Indian troops somewhere in a remote, am I right? Some remote place, yes, up some mountain, somewhere where Chinese came with bats and sticks and beat Indian soldiers. Okay, is that right? I think so.
No, it's not right. Wait. It's a very important distinction to be made. The one you are referring to, the Chinese got beaten back, and that's how they were really very brutally beaten back, and they lost more than 100 soldiers, while Indians lost about 20.
But the Chinese attacked. That was my point.
Chinese attacked.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get at. But
after that,
the record shows that India fought back.
Since that incident,
yes,
China has been behaving well with India.
That's what I'm saying.
That's right.
So that proves my point that when you have an adversary like that, you need to stand up tall against them. I support NATO. I believe it is indispensable to the defense of Europe. Europe is a peculiar, fascinating historical phenomenon, and we can't abandon the ability of NATO being part of that defense, especially with the rising Russia. And yes, your point about expansion of NATO being a stimulus and upsetting to Russia, yeah, I get it. I understand that. But is that a justification for invading a country and killing civilians? And never in a million years. That's my view.
No. Invading to kill civilians is never an issue. Politics plays. You and I both are very cognizant of this fact that, wars are not a solution, and killing people is not a solution.
Of course.
But that's the way the governance is. Mark, great to have you today, and I hope we will have many more conversations, because there are certain very important issues, as we always say, that if we don't fix our house, we can't fix other people's house. As is airline security drill, the management lesson that I learned from that, when the oxygen mask falls,
yes,
put it on yourself first before you help others.
Yes.
So a financially obese country like America, which had a tremendous economic power, today we are financially obese at $33 trillion worth of debt, trillions of dollars of debt servicing. We have impaired ourselves through our reckless spending. And I hope Trump the businessman, Musk the businessman, and people like that are able to bring in efficiency and effectiveness in government.
Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon and the Doge are going to come in, and they're going to use that scissor, and they're going to cut away all the expense, and they already found some interesting things. So all for that. I think it's great, and I think it's a great team to do it. Two brilliant guys will come in, and they're going to be looking at it at government. The truth is, you cannot completely cut back government. You can't do it.
No, you cannot.
But they're going to try.
They are not saying that they will cut back government. They are talking about bringing in efficiency and effectiveness, thereby effectiveness in the process of governance. Because we can't afford a bloated government. Thank you, Mark. As I always say, end my shows with a very powerful Hindu word that we have. It's called Satyameva Jayate. That is the slogan of the marquee of the Indian Supreme Court as well, which says, it means, truth alone triumphs. Truth must.
I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful idea for which we should live for and we should promote.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Privilege of doing this. Very, very nice.
Enjoyed
it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.